Oh, hi! You caught me spilling the tea. Speaking of spilling the tea, let's talk about the great Neal Adams and something he did that wasn't so great.
Comic tropes. Comic tropes.
Hello, welcome to Comic Tropes. I'm your host, Chris. Let me establish something right up front. I consider myself a fan of Neal Adams. I've loved his work on X-Men, Green Lantern, Green Arrow, and especially Batman. He's done a lot of great things over the years. But I also think that we can learn something by looking at the missteps of creators. I think that when we compare and contrast either the best or the worst of a creator, we're going to learn something. And it's in that vein that I want to talk about this week's topic, Batman Odyssey. You see, Adams was one of, if not the most popular artists in comics throughout the 60s and 70s. He mostly worked at DC Comics throughout his career, but he's never stopped working. He's been a businessman in some of his dealings, but he's known in comics primarily as an artist, not so much as a writer, and that's where Batman Odyssey goes off the rails. It's a series DC let him do from 2010 through 2012 across 13 issues, and it makes pretty much no sense at all. But instead of just ranting, let me talk about Neal Adams' career and his contributions so that we can put Batman Odyssey properly in context. I'm going to briefly summarize his overall career and his contributions to the comic book industry. Then we can try to summarize Batman Odyssey, and then from there, go into some of the specifically bizarre choices that it makes. Neal Adams graduated from Manhattan School of Industrial Art High School and attempted to get work at DC Comics in 1959. Unsuccessful, he applied for work at Archie Comics. In 1960, they were relaunching some superhero books under editor Joe Simon. Adams submitted some pages for The Fly, but instead ended up doing one-page strips for Archie's joke book. Finding the work unfulfilling, Adams gained commercial illustration work at the Johnstone and Cushing Agency, which specialized in comic strip advertisements. From 1962, Adams worked on both commercial advertising artwork and illustrated the newspaper strip Ben Casey, based on the television show. In 1966, he made a new effort to break into comics. Warren Publishing specialized in black and white horror magazines, and editor Archie Goodwin liked Adams' work and hired him to illustrate one of his stories in Creepy Number 14, which came out in 1967. The artwork is incredibly realistic and detailed, with solid panel-to-panel pacing, showing that Adams grasped more than the fundamentals of comic book art right from the beginning. Adams leveraged his work at Warren to obtain work at DC Comics. He'd heard that Joe Kubert had moved onto a comic strip and knew that DC would have a vacuum to fill on their various war titles. Adams illustrated an 8-page story in Our World at War number 182 and tried to get work on Batman, but was rejected by the editors of both Batman and Brave and the Bold. Instead, he took work at DC on Jerry Lewis and Bob Hope books just to prove what he could do and stay close in case an opportunity arose. He quickly gained work on covers and fill-in stories, and in a very busy year, illustrated the cover of Strange Adventures number 207. He was also illustrating the interior art on Deadman, a character who had debuted 2 issues previously, and who Adams would go on to be very well known for illustrating. That cover won him the Alley Award for Best Cover that year. His artwork has a lot going for it. There had been artists who worked in detailed photorealistic styles before Adams, like Alex Raymond or Hal Foster. But Adams pushed what artists could do with things like foreshortening and dynamic panel layout. There really wasn't anything that compared to what Adams did on X-Men. It wasn't a top seller when he came on it, and he was allowed to push the boundaries of what you could do. Before, a panel layout was mostly grids, and most of the compositions included medium-distance shots. Adams became popular for offering something new. Neal Adams quickly made a name for himself over the next 2 years, and a lot of that was because he was delivering something original. He was giving very detailed and dynamic artwork that was offering something different than the previous generations of artists had offered in comic books. And it led to him working on X-Men at Marvel. He worked on that from issue 56 through 65, at which point it was going to be canceled. Instead, Marvel ended up throwing it into reprints. Either way, it was not a top seller, and they let the writer and artist experiment to a large extent. But what was really huge about this was that Neal Adams did not use a pseudonym. He continued to freelance at both Marvel and DC simultaneously, and he used his real name at both places. This was groundbreaking at the time. In the 60s, when Marvel started growing into a powerhouse and DC's main competitor, it became an unwritten rule that you worked at one or the other, even if you were freelance. Big-name artists like Gil Kane would still use the pseudonym Scott Edward when he worked in Marvel, but Neal Adams took a calculated risk using his superstar status to break down that barrier, and he continued to fight for creators' rights throughout his career. In the 70s, Neal talked to any publication he could about how Superman creators Siegel and Schuster deserved credit and compensation. Just before the Superman movie debuted, he helped shame parent company Warner Brothers into giving them ongoing credit, pensions, and medical benefits. He started up Continuity Associates in 1971, which provided comic book advertising or storyboards to ad agencies and film productions. That provided work to creators who were between comic book assignments. In 1984, he launched Continuity Comics, where the creators retained the rights to their creations. So when Larry Hama and Michael Golden made Bucky O'Hare, they earned a fortune off the TV, toy, and video game licensing rights. Neal Adams also helped comics mature, at least on an incremental level. He finally began working on Batman in 1970, primarily with writer Denny O'Neil. Editor Julius Schwartz wanted to get past the campy Batman that was then best known thanks to the recent live-action TV show. Adams helped co-create the monstrous Man-Bat, the international eco-terrorist Ra's al Ghul, and helped redefine the Joker. The Joker had become a bit of a goofy character over the years, but in 1973's incredible story, Joker's Five-Way Revenge, he became a threat again. The story takes place in Batman number 251, and Joker is presented as a murdering psychopath, an interpretation that really built him up as a big threat. From there, Adams worked on stuff like the socially conscious Green Lantern Green Arrow book, the Kree-Skrull War epic in Avengers, big event books like Superman vs. Muhammad Ali, and even redesigned the Robin costume that DC had Tim Drake's Robin eventually wear. The point is, Neal Adams is great at a lot of different things. He's a great businessman, he's great at being a proponent for creators' rights, and of course, as an artist, he can do so many different things. He's got so many tools in his belt. He's good at covers, he's good at panel-to-panel storytelling, he's great at expressive faces and hands. He's got a lot of tools in his kit. That doesn't mean that he's a good writer. Because in 2010, he created Batman Odyssey, which he both illustrated and wrote. And trying to summarize it is nearly impossible. And that's not just me saying it. In a 2010 interview with Digital Spy, Neal Adams was asked, "Can you summarize the plot?" And he responded, "I cannot." So, without any further ado, let's try to dig into Batman Odyssey. Batman Odyssey involves a shirtless Bruce Wayne speaking directly to us at the top of each issue, until the last two when we learn he's telling the story to another character. It's full of lengthy, meandering thoughts, reminiscing about a time when he was just debuting. While we're in that flashback, the story sometimes confusingly switches to a more recent flashback, in which Batman is relaying the same story to either Robin or Alfred, depending on the scene. The net result is that these comics are constantly told in confusing flashbacks within flashbacks. They jump back and forth with somebody telling a story, something happening in the past, something supposedly happening in the present. Unless you have an excellent review for doing a flashback within a flashback, it's generally a storytelling no-no. Well, this comic has no good reason for doing anything within it. It doesn't make any sense. Basically, as near as I can tell, just a bunch of things happen. It's about Batman learning the dangers of guns. It's about Batman meeting prehistoric people. It's about Batman fighting Sensei, a martial arts master, a bunch of times. And it's about him blowing up Robin. The story begins with a possibly naked Bruce Wayne talking to us in the Batcave and pointing out that he once had a bullet go through his arm, and that's where his story begins. We flash back to the story of that injury, where Bruce Wayne is on a train and he mentions how he's going to the observation deck. Then he thinks to himself how there aren't many trains with observation decks these days. Get used to that. Because in this story, we're constantly seeing characters' thought balloons, except all they have to think about is some useless bit of trivia, or they're chastising themselves for thinking about something stupid. Basically, it has the net result of everybody acting distracted. It seems like Gotham City could really benefit from a citywide dose of Adderall so that they can focus. Bruce puts on an early Batman costume that has embarrassingly floppy ears. You'd think a billionaire could at least afford something better than bad cosplay. He also climbs with one hand on the ladder, thinking to himself how it was stupid to draw his gun before he started climbing. Yes, this is a Batman that does stupid things and thinks to himself how stupid he is. He also has a text box above his thought balloon telling us what he thought and how he thinks this is what his namesake would do, because bats famously love climbing ladders on trains. At the top, he realizes the train is full of fuel and confronts some bandits that are about to steal it. He shoots at them, but is said to be taking non-lethal shots. He gets shot right through his right forearm, but it didn't hit the bone, so he's somehow fine and able to perfectly throw aimed batarangs. Batman takes out the thieves, but is called out by their leader. Batman thinks to himself that it's Commissioner Rodriguez, but he's not drawn like any police commissioner, and that's not a previously existing character, so the name is very confusing. Regardless, Rodriguez threatens to blow up the entire train unless Batman, or as he calls him, Hombre Murcielago, drops his guns. Is Batman willing to kill? He doesn't have to, because a different Mexican authority named El Maniaco shoots Rodriguez. Then we cut to Batman telling this story to Robin, and I guess letting Robin play with the same handguns. Robin says they make him feel cool and powerful, but then he's snatched up by the flying Man-Bat, and Batman doesn't react to this at all. What is even going on here? Everything, apparently. Eventually, Man-Bat puts Robin down and Batman yells at him, telling him he shouldn't turn himself into Man-Bat. Apparently, Batman is not at all concerned that Man-Bat, also known as Kirk Langstrom, knows where the Batcave is. Kirk says he has info for Batman, but Batman ignores him and then answers Commissioner Gordon's call that there's an attack at the pier. Batman tells Robin that it's a cover for Riddler attacking the Gotham Mint, but how he knows any of this is unexplained. Instead, Batman starts making weird jokes, telling Robin that his Batmobile is so cool it's James Bond cubed, and he calls Robin the Boy Blunder. Did you just call me the Boy Wonder? Blunder. Thank God! That's just some nice dialogue. Mwah! Batman also makes a joke about the car having its seals activated by saying "arf arf," which is a perfectly in-character moment, and Batman and Robin race to the piers. On the drive there, Robin reads a clue from the Riddler, but Batman insists the police can handle it, and that they'll take care of some criminals at the piers. He then says that there's a dinosaur exhibit there that he learned about from Kirk Langstrom. So is that why he let Kirk visit the Batcave? Because he seemed to already have access to that information. Oh, sorry. I was trying to make sense of this. I forgot. It just doesn't make sense. At the piers, some criminals have kidnapped a scientist, his daughter, and plan to blow up a car that runs on hydrogen by shooting it. Cliffhanger. But in the second issue, it doesn't blow up, and there are pages after pages of the scientist and Batman explaining that hydrogen won't explode because it's diffused in a hydride. The criminal refuses to believe it after it's explained 3 times to him. Then, to emphasize the danger of guns, Batman ends up getting shot. But not just once, about 100 times. Neal Adams draws Batman just dancing across the page with gunshots erupting all over him. Being shot to hell makes Batman pass out and remember his first adventure on the train. Except now, instead of helping him, El Maniaco has a bomb and plans to blow up the train. So why did he stop Rodriguez? That's never explained. He just has different motivations now. Batman decides to scare the passengers off the train by shooting bullets over their heads, and I guess not worrying about ricochets. An old lady needs help, and Batman saves her. The explosion of the train looks pretty sweet. Somehow Batman saves the old lady, and now the train conductor wanders up with a gun. He assumes Batman crashed the train, so he shoots him, and apparently it happens to go through the exact same hole in his arm that he was shot in before. Batman ends the issue passing out, thinking about how funny that is. The third issue begins with Bruce Wayne recovering from that gunshot at the Batcave and ranting to Alfred about how he wishes he had killed El Maniaco. Alfred is probably smoothing his mustache here, but let's not rule out that he's sniffing his fingers while Bruce rants. But when Alfred offers to talk, Bruce shifts moods from rage to calm. He changes his mood faster than Homer Simpson. It's because Batman is a very stable genius. The story then shifts back to the shot-up Batman at the piers, and he's shot point blank in the face. But on the next page, Batman stirs from his flashbacks and beats up the criminals. Narration boxes explain that his suit is covered in bulletproof plating and bags of fake blood to fool criminals. That means that every time Batman goes out for action, underneath his suit, he's got about half a gallon of fake blood just sloshing around. Perfect for stealth. After defeating the criminals, Commissioner Gordon walks in with the Riddler in handcuffs. Apparently, the police easily captured him at the Mint. Gordon asks why Batman chose to protect the dinosaur statue over the Mint. Batman never really answers this. Instead, Gordon seems to be there mostly to say that the dinosaur statue was a private donation, and that's the cue the donor was waiting for. Talia al Ghul walks in. Now, the comic doesn't explain who Talia is, she just starts flirting with Batman. I think Neal Adams expects the reader to be very familiar already with a lot of the characters that he's created, worked on, or co-created. Because we've got characters like Man-Bat, Ra's al Ghul, Sensei, Deadman. These are all prominent characters that he's worked on. None of them get a proper introduction, just so that you can have a baseline to understand where things are. Talia is the daughter of a guy named Ra's al Ghul. He has access to something called Lazarus Pits, which are sort of like fountains of youth. They can keep him young and regenerated. He sometimes will act as a criminal. He wants to destroy cities and stuff like that so that humanity doesn't go too far with either technology or becoming evil. That's not super important in this. What is important is that Talia is his heir, but he wants a male heir. He wants Batman to marry Talia. He did have a son before Talia, and he is known as Sensei. Sensei is a master martial artist and assassin, but Ra's al Ghul never gave him access to the Lazarus Pits, so Sensei now hates his father. That's important to the story. Sensei is also tied to Deadman, but we'll just try to put that aside. Maybe we'll get to that later. Everyone just stands around listening to Batman. The police don't book Riddler. Talia is worried about Batman being injured, but he distracts her by complimenting her dress. Then Batman shows how the car the terrorist wanted to blow up gives off water as exhaust. At this point, I challenge you to try to guess, what is Batman Odyssey about? Is it about the Riddler stealing from the Mint? Is it about Ra's al Ghul sending goons to destroy some sort of hydrogen-powered car? Is it about Batman learning about the dangers of guns and the first time he was shot? No, it's not really about any of those things. Those are just things that happen. This goes nowhere. None of this really leads to anything. They are just things that happen. That is the insanity of Odyssey. It doesn't really go anywhere. It's just things happening. All right, enough ranting. I'm going to speed up how much we cover each issue moving forward. The next issue starts with Batman ripping Riddler's face off and telling everyone he's really a killer named Ruben Blades. Who is Ruben Blades? No one. He's never been in the comics before. He's never been mentioned before. Surprise, there's a Riddler imposter. I'd say this comes out of left field, but left field is an actual location, and this is so random, it just materializes out of nowhere. Rubin now drops out of his handcuffs and has both a detonator and a gun. Batman throws a batarang at the gun, and the gun shoots the little girl whose scientist dad had been kidnapped earlier. The scientist gets hilariously emotional and doesn't understand how this could happen since he's Batman after all. Batman beats the hell out of Rubin for this, including a weird move where his fists fly away from the middle of Rubin's head in a strange arc. Just before killing him, someone just shouts out that the girl is actually okay, and Batman must have deflected the bullet. What? I think Neal Adams honestly approached this as he would just draw pages, and then he went back to come up with a script later, and he forgot what he intended to do. Before the story can progress, we have a page where Batman is telling this story to Alfred. Alfred says he's playing the world's smallest violin, but his hand gesture is decidedly something else. Then Deadman floats in. He's a ghost that can possess people, but is otherwise invisible and silent to the living. You know, like the ghost of Christmas past. He just yells that Batman is an idiot for not understanding what the true mystery is, but makes no effort to possess anyone and explain. The story cuts back to Batman on the pier, where Talia pulls out her scrapbook and reveals she and Bruce used to be friends when they were kids, and that their fathers ran an oil company together. This is so bonkers. This is a retcon saying that Ra's al Ghul never figured out that Batman is Bruce Wayne. He just always knew about it because he knew about the caves underneath Gotham or Wayne Manor. This is just so funny to me. It's just like, it just changes everything. But you're like, well, why did Ra's al Ghul never mention any of this before? Who knows? No reason. Then a bigger Man-Bat tries to steal the scrapbook and tells Talia to shut up. Then a man in a suit that looks like a cross between Batman and the Huntress jumps in. Before this can be resolved, a gigantic manta ray jumps over the pier and impales this Man-Bat, who falls into the water below. It turns out the manta ray was ordered to do so by Aquaman, who just casually walks up and talks about how he rules the oceans. Okay, so now piers are in Aquaman's jurisdiction. Got it. Is he just sort of hiding underneath them, listening for a crime to happen? Oh, an excuse to do something. Batman and Aquaman bring back the monster Man-Bat, along with the help of a humpback whale who was hanging out by the pier. Batman gives him the Man-Bat antidote, and it turns out he's Ubu, the main henchman of Ra's al Ghul. Why is he using the Man-Bat serum? That's never explained. Talia goes back to showing him more photos and talking about how her father, Ra's, runs the underworld. And Batman's like, yeah, I know that your father runs a criminal empire. Meanwhile, Deadman is flipping out, going, no, why aren't you listening carefully? She's trying to tell you something. Because Talia is basically trying to subtly, not so subtly really, tell him that Ra's runs a literal underworld. Now, halfway through the issue, the story switches to a subplot of the Joker at an art museum, and he slices up a guard's face. Batman hilariously tells the guard it's pretty bad, actually, and meekly offers him some cotton to stop all the blood flow. Batman is ready to arrest the Joker's henchmen when the guard blows them away, and Deadman pops back up to possess Joker. Batman knocks out the guard, and no one ever goes to tend to his bleeding ever again. Two cops just appear, and we have to deal with pages arguing that they're going to take Joker back to Arkham Asylum, and Batman insists that the Joker needs to first go to jail and have a new trial. It is an exhausting argument, and Batman finally just knocks out the cops, which would probably ruin his relationship with the police department. But at this point, you're so tired of hearing a nonsensical argument that you're just ready to move forward, and you're like, fine. Batman then cuffs the Joker because Deadman never says that he's in control. Instead, Batman takes Joker to the tunnels underneath Arkham Asylum for no clear reason, and they have a debate that goes on for pages where Deadman as Joker argues all Batman does is chase clowns, and Batman grumbles that he's put away actual criminals. They enter the sewer tunnels under Arkham and bump into the real Man-Bat. Man-Bat never took his antidote and he's out of control. So Deadman jumps into his body to calm him down, and somehow Batman instantly understands that Deadman is there helping out. Joker runs away in the confusion. Man-Bat turns back into Kirk and Deadman goes to grab Joker once more. Kirk tells Batman that an unnamed they wanted Batman to be right where he is and he came to warn him. No idea where he learned this, but he gives Batman a key to end issue 5. Issue 6 begins the same as all of them, Bruce narrating to us, trying to make this make sense, but really just listing things that happened. Batman and Deadman in Joker's body enter a big room under Arkham and meet Dr. Chu, who says they got a big donation from Ra's al Ghul. Then a big cyborg calling himself Trigger shows up. Dr. Chu calls him Dr. Slattern, so apparently Neal Adams doesn't know that that's a word for a dirty woman. Dr. Slattern has kidnapped Talia, but Batman easily defeats him. Dr. Chu slides a massive wall away to reveal all of Batman's enemies, from Penguin to Bane to a giant gorilla with a baseball cap?
Who is that supposed to be? My best guess is the obscure villain Gorilla Boss, but that's just a guess.
Dr. Chu reveals he is Sensei, the evil martial arts master and vindictive son of Ra's al Ghul. Batman tells Deadman that that isn't really Talia, it's just someone in makeup. Batman also cripples Trigger by hilariously breaking his arms. This cuts to Batman telling this story to Alfred, who explains he kept a secret. He knows that the League of Assassins has a test where they have to kill a circus acrobat to become full members.
I know that makes no sense, but it does connect to something. Alfred explains to Bruce that Boston Brand, who became Deadman, was a world-renowned trapeze artist that was murdered by Sensei as a type of audition into the League of Assassins. And then he has to explain to Bruce, who is supposed to be the world's greatest detective, remember, hey, how did Robin's parents die? Remember Robin's parents, those circus acrobats? And that leads to the most hilarious face ever illustrated.
Yeah, apparently Robin's parents were killed by the League of Assassins. Then everyone starts entering the Batcave. Robin comes in, then Ra's al Ghul walks in and explains Sensei runs the League of Assassins. Ubu with Man-Bat powers comes in and Bruce beats him up. Then the weird Batman in purple emerges with his Robin. Apparently, they're a Neanderthal and evolved dinosaur who live in an underground world. This all gets explained in a panel or two. Ra's says Sensei is behind everything, and Bruce says he'll now take a nap, and he lays down on the floor and takes one to end the issue.
And at this point, Neal took a small hiatus. The original plan was for 12 issues. He took a break for several months, and when he came back, there was a volume 2 that ended up going for 7 issues, one more. And while the dialogue is still bonkers, it doesn't make a lick of sense. Character motivations turn on a dime. At the same time, there's a little bit more coherence to everything, because at this point, Batman just enters the underworld, and his mission is to track down Sensei and confront him.
The storytelling is still jumping all over the place. Batman is telling his story to an unseen individual, but we now see he has man's hands. We get awesome action scenes of Batman riding dinosaurs into fights. The underworld has its own Batman and Robin that lead Bruce below and explain that the Earth is like a geode, constantly pushing inwards and outwards.
Because you see, Neal Adams is cool, but he's also a little weird. Neal Adams believes in this theory that the Earth is constantly expanding, kind of like a geode. I don't know the official term for this expanding Earth theory, but it was debunked a long time ago when there was absolute scientific consensus that plate tectonics is the mechanism by which the Earth shifts and moves. It is not constantly growing.
But whatever, Neal Adams believes the Earth is growing, and at least it leads to cool comic book ideas, because in comic books, I totally can buy into the idea of a hollow Earth with an underground society. Fine. Totally cool in comic books. I don't believe it in real life because I'm just a very skeptical person by nature, but in comic books, fine, cool, let's go with it. The underworld has Neanderthals, evolved dinosaurs, and even trolls. The trolls are pretty gross and weird though, and Deadman calls them mud puppies, which just sounds wrong. Oh, apparently Deadman is solid in the underworld. It's never explained why. There's other weirdos living underground, including scientists who move below, wizards with cartoon pointy hats with stars, aliens, and Egyptian gods that are actually genetic creations. One of them calls for Wep Wawet, who in Egyptian mythology has a wolf's head. In the comic, he's a big hippo man. Not quite as much time spent researching Egyptian mythology as he spent researching hydrogen cars and expanding planets. Robin heads down on his own and is kidnapped by Sensei. Apparently cell phones still work down there, so Sensei calls Batman, who does the most reasonable thing he can. He blows up Robin. Robin appears just fine in the next issue, and they reveal it was a trick, but that trick still sent Robin's mask flying and seemed to blow off a henchman's arm. Robin surviving ground zero of an explosion is just another quirk of Batman Odyssey. After a big fight with Sensei, Batman returns Talia to his mansion, where she knocks out Ra's al Ghul, and we're told that Ra's actually set everything in motion to make Batman blame Sensei and ideally kill him for Ra's. Instead, Sensei comes up and fights Batman in an epic fight, but they battle underneath Arkham in front of Batman's rogues gallery, and I guess Ra's just gets to walk away. Batman shoots Sensei to death. This terrifies his enemies into hopefully behaving in the future. And then we learn that Batman and Sensei planned all this. Sensei wore squibs like I did 2 weeks ago, and Batman gave him some Lazarus Pit formula, letting him revert to a baby. And then Bruce gets him adopted by a couple. Then we learn this story was all for the benefit of reporter Clark Kent. Sorry, but I don't see how Clark Kent is actually supposed to be able to report on this because it makes no sense. We just read the whole thing and it's just a bunch of events happening. I don't think the average Daily Planet reader is going to be able to enjoy it much more than we were. I suspect that what happened was Neal Adams may have had an idea in his head, but he just drew each page and then went back to try to come up with the script and the dialogue. That's just my guess, because there's a disconnect here where the story does not make sense. And I'm sorry, but his ear for dialogue is bad and character motivations change constantly. Now, you can enjoy the artwork. There's a lot to enjoy about the artwork. There are some great fight scenes. A lot of them I didn't cover in this review, but there are some really cool fight scenes. The dinosaurs and the whole underworld, it looks fantastic. Some of the facial features are sometimes a little too exaggerated for my tastes, but it's really good art. I'm not going to complain about the art. I will complain about one technique is I wish Neal Adams had more establishing shots, because there are a lot of scenes where characters are just sort of popping in and out and you're not really sure where they are in relation to each other or where they entered or exited. So that part's a little confusing sometimes. It adds to the overall confusion. But in general, the art is solid. I think if you want to see Neal Adams at his absolute best, take a look at those Batman issues in the 70s. That is some awesome, awesome stuff. And I especially loved Joker's 5-Way Revenge. That is a great story. Anyway, that is a look at Odyssey. It just sort of shows that you can be great at one thing, like illustration. You can be great at several things, like also being, a businessman and publisher. It doesn't necessarily make you good at everything, because I'm sorry, I don't think he's a great writer. Hopefully we learned something from this. And now I think it's time to take a quick look at what fan art came in this week. Let's do it. Tyler Garcia sent in a fun piece featuring all sorts of Marvel superheroes. Matthew Farmer illustrated me as the Absorbing Man from my recent Immortal Hulk review. Grimlock shows us what happened when Self got infected with the transmode virus.
Joseph Bleak provides a colorful illustration of me considering my superhero life. Marvin Duran created art featuring me wiping your memory after my Men in Black episode. Marvin includes his Instagram handle. Mad Max Machina sent in this art in Ratfink style. You can find more artwork at the Mad Max Machina Instagram. Ella Price made an amazing recreation of the famous Wolverine cover by Frank Miller. I especially love the lettering. Ella has a YouTube channel for more. Fidel Correa from Chile made a Men in Black illustration that shows who's really in charge. Fidel has more art on Instagram. Seth Leoric sent in this logo, which he says is like MIB, but instead it's SCP. Finally, Pekka and Lasse from Finland return, and they've illustrated me as Puck from Alpha Flight. Time to live an interesting life.
I love that stuff. I'm always happy to feature some fan art if it has something to do with comic tropes. Just send it into this email address, comictropes@gmail.com. I'm happy to feature it. And then on top of that, while it lasts, I will draw a Gachapon prize out of the Gachapony machine that was donated to us by Lunar Shine Store, and I will give that to one of the entrants. So I've got a bunch of numbers here this week. I've got 10 numbers. I'm dropping them into a bag to see who wins the Gachapon. Let's just shake it up. Got my script down here so I can refer to the number. Okay, so number seven you can see. And number 7 was Ella Price. Ella Price, you won a Gachapon. Let's quickly set this aside, see what you won. Oh, very cool, very cool. Don't know how well you'll see that, but that is a sushi cat. That is a cat on a piece of sushi. Very Japanesey. That is a great prize. Ella, I will get your contact information and send that your way. Thank you, everyone, for taking a look at this. Thank you so much for all the support. I've gotten a lot of new subscribes. I've gotten a lot of shares. I've gotten a lot of amazing emails and messages from people just saying that they enjoy the show. And you know what? That is all fuel in the tank that keeps me going. It makes it all fun for me. So thank you for that. And if you want to support the show, you can also look at either, I've got Patreon, I've got Coffee. If you just want to do a one-time tip, that's Coffee. If you want to do an ongoing basis, I've got Patreon as low as $1. You can look into that. There are the links. And I've got some really fun, exciting stuff coming up. I cannot wait to share it. I wish I could do more than one episode a week. I can barely do one a week, all right? It just takes too much time with my full-time job. I wish I could do more. Someday, maybe. Someday. We are getting up there with the subscription count. So thank you so much, everybody, for your support. And until next time, keep reading comics.